ultimate secrets of the divine universe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, right. You're reading through centuries of theological debate, lofty promises of spiritual reward, the actual mechanics of navigating a righteous. Finished on Tuesday, April 28, 2026 at 11:54 a.m.
I mean, I love that detail so much.
It's so good. Today, we're looking at exactly that. Welcome to the deep dive. We have our hands on a deeply fascinating set of sources today.
Really do.
Yeah, we're looking at a stack of handwritten, deeply analytical Urdu notes unpacking Islamic theological commentary. And you can literally see the train of thought on the lined pages, the crossouts, the sudden insights.
It is such a striking image because you normally look at religious texts and you see, I don't know, polished, finalized doctrine that feels like it was just handed down from a mountain.
Right, untouchable.
Yeah, untouchable. You rarely feel the human being behind the pen. But that date and timestamp completely bridges the gap between these massive, timeless spiritual frameworks and the very specific, messy reality of, a Tuesday morning.
Literally a Tuesday morning.
Right. It's essentially theology for a Tuesday at noon.
Which is exactly our mission today. We are going to unpack this commentary with you because it revolves around a profound Quranic promise that gets right to the core of how humans operate.
It really does.
So the notes break this promise down into three main components. There's a double reward, a guiding light, and the rather inconvenient reality of human error.
Which we all deal with.
So true. So let's get right into the text. The notes begin by looking at a divine promise made to believers that they will receive a double reward along with a guiding light and a messenger to follow.
Right.
But the author immediately points out a massive scholarly disagreement right out of the gate, like right away.
They do. And to understand this disagreement, we really have to look at the tradition of Mufassir, the commentators.
Okay, the commentator.
Yeah. These aren't just casual readers. These are scholars who practice a very specific science of exegesis. They look at historical context, linguistics, the whole architecture of the chapters.
Like a structural teardown of the text.
Exactly. And whenever you have a text this layered, you're going to have brilliant minds disagreeing on the exact application of the words. The debate the author highlights is over one highly specific question.
Which is?
Who exactly qualifies for this double reward?
Right. And reading through the notes, I was trying to map this onto a modern scenario so I could wrap my head around it.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Well, it feels a bit like a debate over a corporate bonus structure.
Okay, a corporate bonus.
Yeah. Like management sends out a memo saying, hey, there's a double bonus this year. And instantly, the whole office is arguing over who the intended audience is.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the new hires who just brought in a bunch of fresh energy, or are we talking about the veterans who've been keeping the lights on for years?
Well, actually, if we look at the historical context the notes provide, it's almost the inverse of your analogy.
Oh, really? How so?
Let's look at Group 1's argument from the notes. They argue that the double reward is directed specifically at the people of the book, and the text explicitly mentions Christians in this context.
Okay.
So in your corporate analogy, Group 1 are the veterans. They have been loyal to the older subsidiary for years, and now they're being asked to adapt to a massive new corporate merger.
Oh, okay. Okay, so they aren't the new kids on the block. They're the established believers.
Right, exactly.
But wait, I have to challenge the logic here just a bit. Why would they get a double reward?
What do you mean?
Well, doesn't that inherently disadvantage a modern believer? Like, why should someone get a twofold spiritual bonus just because of the historical era they happen to live in, while someone living today only gets a single reward?
That's a fair point.
It just feels a little, I don't know, structurally unfair.
That is a very natural pushback. But the notes actually explain the specific mechanism of what Group 1 is arguing, which is this concept of sequential faith.
Sequential faith?
Yes. Imagine you are someone who deeply believed in your original prophet. The text uses the example of Hazrat Isa, or Jesus.
Okay, so you're a devout Christian in that era.
Right. And you didn't just casually identify with it. You lived your life by those teachings, your community was built around it, your entire social standing was tied to it.
That's your whole identity.
Exactly. Then a new revelation comes. Recognizing it and choosing to also believe in the Prophet Muhammad wasn't just a simple mental switch.
No, I mean, it would be a complete upheaval of your life.
It really would. You risk ostracization.
Yeah.
You're breaking away from established societal norms. So Group 1 argues that you earn a twofold reward because of the immense psychological and social heavy lifting involved in transitioning.
That makes so much sense.
Right. You maintained your original faith against the odds of that earlier era, and then you possessed the spiritual flexibility, the humility, and the sheer courage to embrace the subsequent truth.
So it's like you get one reward for the first conviction and a second for the profound difficulty of accepting the latter.
Precisely.
Okay, I actually really like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's compensating for the social friction of the transition. It's not just about what era you were born in. It's about the active friction you had to endure to maintain that sequential faith.
Exactly. But then the notes introduce group 2, who look at this from a completely different angle.
Right, because scholars never agree on just one thing.
Never. Group 2's methodology is entirely different. They aren't looking at historical sequencing or social friction at all. They are making a structural argument.
Okay.
They argue this promise is directed generally at the Muslims.
When you say a structural argument, how does that actually work in the context of exegesis? Are they just like reading the room?
Not at all. It's actually a highly technical linguistic approach.
Really?
Yeah. When Group 2 makes a structural argument, they are looking at the architecture of the surah, the chapter itself. They analyze who the pronouns in the Arabic text are pointing to in the preceding verses.
Oh, I see. So it's grammatically driven.
Completely. They point out that the overarching address of the entire surah is directed at the believers, the Muslims. Structurally speaking, if the whole letter is addressed to you,
then the special bonus mentioned in paragraph 4 naturally applies to you, too.
you got it. They argue the text shouldn't be suddenly restricted to a historical subgroup when the wider architecture of the chapter just doesn't support that restriction.
Wow. Okay. So group 1 relies on historical precedent and the specific mechanics of sequential belief,
Right.
while group 2 relies on the structural linguistics of the text itself. What I find fascinating, though, is how the author of our Tuesday morning notes handles this.
It's so good.
They don't treat it like a cage match where only one interpretation survives.
And that is the genius of the author's synthesis here. I mean, this is a hallmark of truly mature textual analysis.
Yeah, they don't force a winner.
No, they don't. The author looks at the evidence and concludes that both groups have valid references. They both have robust, logical methodologies.
So they can both be right.
Yes. The notes suggest that it is entirely possible that both interpretations hold weight simultaneously.
Meaning the divine treasury doesn't operate on scarcity.
I love how you phrase that.
Well, it's true, right? It's expansive enough to encompass both the sequential believers who endured the friction of transition and the general audience structurally addressed in the text.
Exactly. The reward is big enough for everyone.
Okay, so that establishes that the reward is there. But, knowing a reward exists theoretically doesn't actually help a believer qualify for it day to day.
Which brings us to the real question.
Right. How do you actually navigate life well enough to earn it?
Which is the perfect pivot to the second major component of the commentary.
The light.
Yes. Getting the reward requires guidance, and the text promises that believers will be granted a light, or nur, to walk in. Right. This is where the notes move from theological theory to the intensely practical tools of faith.
Now, I have to admit some bias here for you and the listeners. When I was reading through the sources, the word light triggered all my cynic alarms.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, usually when ancient texts talk about light, it's presented as this hyper-mystical, completely ethereal concept.
Right, like something out of reach.
Exactly. It sounds like a glowing aura you only experience in the afterlife, or some unattainable state of Zen that requires you to, abandon society and meditate in a cave.
Right.
But the tone of these handwritten notes feels incredibly grounded. So how does the author actually operationalize this concept of nur?
The author is highly aware of that duality, actually. The notes confirm that on one level, this nur absolutely refers to the literal light of the hereafter.
So there's a spiritual side to it.
Yes, there is an ultimate spiritual reality to it. But you're completely right to pick up on the grounded tone.
Yeah, it felt very practical.
Because the true beating heart of this commentary is focused squarely on the worldly immediate application of that light. The author explicitly states that this light is used when believers face the difficult matters of life.
So it's not an afterlife reward, it's a present-day utility.
Exactly.
I was thinking about it like a flashlight. It's not a spotlight at the end of a tunnel showing you where the grand exit is.
I like that analogy.
Thanks. It's more like a flashlight handed to you so you can navigate a dark, complicated forest right now.
Let's expand on that, actually, because the mechanism of a flashlight is exactly what the text implies.
Okay.
Think about the psychology of the dark forest, the difficult matters of life.
Right.
In modern terms, that's decision fatigue, moral dilemmas, the cognitive overload of just trying to figure out the right thing to do on a Tuesday at noon.
When you're just exhausted and trying to make it through the day.
Right. So when we say Noor acts as a flashlight, the mechanism here is moral clarity. It is an internalized ethical framework.
How does that actually manifest, though? Like, what does moral clarity feel like in the middle of a messy situation?
It manifests as the ability to filter out the noise.
Filter out the noise?
Yeah. When you face a dilemma at work, say, a choice between taking credit for a colleague's idea to get a promotion or staying silent and losing out.
A very real dark forest scenario.
Exactly. The forest is dark because your ego, your greed, and societal pressure are all obscuring the path.
Right. You're tempted to just take the credit.
But the Noor, according to this commentary, is the sudden ability to filter out that ego. It illuminates the objectively just choice. It shows you the literal next step on the straight path mentioned in the notes.
Notice you said the next step.
Yes.
Because a flashlight doesn't illuminate the entire forest. It doesn't show you your destination 3 miles away.
No, it doesn't.
It only shows you the roots you need to step over in the next 3 feet.
Precisely. And that requires continuous reliance on the light. You can't just memorize the map. You have to keep the flashlight on for every single step.
Right.
It takes belief out of the realm of abstract thought and turns it into a daily operational mechanism for making decisions.
But see, this introduces a massive paradox, and it's the thing I got stuck on the most while reading.
Oh, what's the paradox?
If I have a divine flashlight of moral clarity,
Right.
if I possess this internalized ethical framework that helps me filter out my ego, why am I still screwing up?
Yes.
I mean, the final section of the notes places this incredibly heavy emphasis on forgiving faults. But if you have the light, shouldn't you be immune to tripping over the roots?
That is the million-dollar question. And this is where the notes deliver the ultimate reality check.
Okay, lay it on me.
The author unpacks a profoundly realistic view of human nature. The text specifies that forgiving faults isn't contradictory to having the light. It is the necessary counterpart to it.
A counterpart.
Yes. It acknowledges a fundamental truth. Even sincere, fully committed believers, people who are holding the flashlight tightly, actively trying to filter out their ego and make the right choices,
They're still gonna mess up.
they will inevitably stumble.
Yes. Is that because the forest is just that dark, or because human nature is just that flawed?
Both, honestly. Having faith and possessing that ethical framework does not overwrite human fallibility.
So the light doesn't make you perfect.
The notes are very clear. Having the light does not make someone flawless. In fact, to address this inevitable human flaw, the notes highlight 2 very specific divine attributes.
Right. Ghafur Rahim, the most forgiving, the most merciful. But these aren't just like titles in the context of this commentary, are they?
No, they are active mechanisms. And there is a crucial nuance in the grammar and the explanation the author provides here.
Okay, what's the nuance?
When the notes discuss this mercy, it is explicitly described as a continuous action.
Continuous.
Yes, it is not a one-time pardon. The text states that God continuously accepts repentance for sins and forgives humans.
Wow. So it's a permanent safety net woven beneath the straight path.
Beautifully said, yes.
And I think we need to talk about why that continuous aspect is a psychological necessity.
Let's do it.
Think about how we operate in society. We generally have a 3 strikes policy.
Very true.
Whether it's the justice system or even how we treat our friends when they disappoint us. Human forgiveness operates on a budget, and eventually that budget runs dry.
It absolutely does. And if divine forgiveness operated on that same human budget, what would happen?
Well, you would just stop trying.
Exactly.
If you knew you only had 3 chances and you tripped over a root on your second day in the forest, the sheer weight of knowing you were one mistake away from permanent failure would paralyze you.
You'd freeze.
You would just sit down in the dark and give up. Despair would take over.
That is exactly the mechanism the notes are addressing. The text's emphasis on Ghafur Rahim as a continuous state implies that if humans didn't believe forgiveness was continuous, they would never have the courage to walk the straight path to begin with.
Because the fear of failure would be too high.
Right. The safety net isn't just a loophole to let you get away with bad behavior. The mercy is what actually powers the forward momentum.
It removes the paralysis of perfectionism.
Yes. It removes the paralysis.
It's like the difference between walking a tightrope without a net versus walking it with one.
Well, that's a great way to look at it.
You are still trying your hardest not to fall. You are still using all your focus and your light to stay on the rope. But the presence of the net allows you to take the first step.
It allows you to be brave.
Exactly. That is an incredibly sophisticated psychological insight for a Tuesday morning.
It really is. The author of these notes has outlined a completely holistic ecosystem of human behavior and spiritual reality.
They didn't just summarize old texts.
No, they synthesized how a human being actually operates under the weight of these divine promises.
So let's bring this all together for you listening right now. We started with a timestamp, April 28th, 2026.
Just a normal Tuesday.
A real person sitting down with lined paper and a pen, diving into a massive Quranic promise. And we followed their logic through the science of exegesis, looking at the debate over the double reward.
Right, the scholarly debate.
We saw how the heavy social friction of transitioning faiths justifies a historical twofold bonus, while the structural linguistics of the text prove that the broader community of believers is also addressed.
The treasury is big enough for both.
Exactly. We then explored how one actually navigates toward that reward.
Moving away from the mystical, unattainable ideas of light.
Right, and looking at Noor as a practical daily mechanism, an internalized ethical framework, a flashlight that cuts through the ego and the noise to illuminate the very next step in the dark forest of our daily lives.
It's all about that next step.
And finally, we confronted the paradox of the flashlight. The fact that having moral clarity doesn't stop you from being human.
We will all stumble.
We looked at the profound necessity of Ghafur Rahim, a continuous, active state of mercy that prevents the paralysis of perfectionism, a permanent safety net that gives you the courage to keep walking, even when you inevitably trip over those roots.
And as we wrap up, I think there's a powerful takeaway here for you to consider as you go back to your own complex Tuesday morning realities.
I'd love to hear it.
Consider how these notes frame the entire concept of faith. It is not presented as a static, fragile state of perfection that shatters the moment you make an error.
Which is how a lot of people view it.
Right, but it's framed here as an ongoing, resilient cycle. The text implies something deeply thought-provoking.
Okay.
Having a guiding light isn't about never making a mistake. The true purpose of the light is to give you the clarity to actually see when you have wandered off the path.
Oh, wow.
The light shows you the mistake, and the continuous mercy is the mechanism that allows you to return without despair.
The light doesn't prevent the stumble. It illuminates the way home.
Exactly.
That is a brilliant synthesis. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into these profoundly human, incredibly rich theological notes.
It was a pleasure.
We hope it gave you some clarity, some practical mechanisms, and maybe a little bit of grace for whatever dark forest you might be navigating today. Keep questioning, keep seeking out the nuances, and keep your flashlight on.